Hey everyone, welcome to Redefining HR podcast. I'm your host, Lars Schmidt, and today I'm really excited to sit down with Tony Jamous. Tony is the founder and CEO of Oyster. We're going to be talking about all things remote work, which is a topic that I know is front and center for all of you right now. So Tony, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I'd love to have you open with just an introduction for the audience.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Lars. Thank you for having me here, and look forward to having an exciting conversation with you today on remote work. So a bit of intro about myself. So I'm, as Lars said, I'm the CEO and founder of Oyster. Before that, also Oyster is a global employment platform. Before that, I was the CEO of Nexmo, which was another technology hypergrowth company in the API space that went public in mid-2016 and got acquired last year by Ericsson. I'm originally from Lebanon. I was born in Lebanon. I had this opportunity when I was a teenager to move to France and study computer science, and that enabled me to really understand that you can have an equal world opportunity in countries that really invest in their people, and that was kind of influenced me to create Oyster as first and foremost to be a mission-driven company, reducing the inequality when it comes to access to opportunity.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're here, and I have a lot of questions for you. So I'm going to dig right in, and I know the topic of remote work is front and center for not just HR practitioners, but the business world in general right now. And so before you started Oyster, did you have experience yourself with remote work? Like what was your level of experience and exposure with kind of remote working prior to founding Oyster?
Yeah, so I was doing remote work without realizing I was doing remote work. Essentially, my company Nexmo that I founded and led for 8 years before the acquisition we employed people in 45 countries, and we had an HQ in San Francisco and we had an HQ in London, and I had like half of my leadership team in each part of the continent, and then I was working remotely, but we did not have the tools, we didn't have the methodologies. It was really inefficient, and I had to spend half of my time traveling between London and San Francisco, and that wasn't great, not only for my health, but also for the environment. And I'm so glad. I live today in Cyprus. I live in an isolated island in the middle of the Mediterranean. I can run a hyper-growth tech company from here, and it's working. And I had exposure to remote work in the past, but now we're doing it more effectively.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear, the origin story of kind of how Oyster came to be. You mentioned the mission-driven element of being able to create more opportunities globally for talent. Walk me through the beginning. Your company was acquired. This was probably an idea that maybe was marinating, and then you decided you wanted to commit to building this. So what were the early days like for you?
Yeah. So we in our previous company we employed people in 45 countries. We had to, because we put a software on top of a globally fragmented and regulated telecom industry. What we did is we lowered the barrier to entry to innovation with APIs, and then boom, we created a new category, and we're doing the same today for global employment. But when we hired these people in 45 countries, I realized the power of being distributed. Not only you have access to a diverse talent pool, but also you can change people's life in many countries. We would be like the best employer in Argentina for knowledge workers. But I was really frustrated at Nexmo as the CEO, because it would take us 3 to 6 months to set up an entity in a country, and most of the time we would miss out on the talent that we wanted to hire, because they cannot wait 6 months or 3 months to be hired, and the experience would. Like we would not expert in Moroccan regulation, employment law. We were not expert in France payroll. We did lots of mistakes around that. So I wasn't looking forward to that challenge. And when I decided I want to start a new business, it was important to me that it is a mission-driven business, because I came to a stage in my career where that's important. But also it had to be globally distributed, because I knew we needed to make that impact. But I wasn't looking forward to that challenge. So I started looking for solutions. I did not find solution. What I found was an industry called employer of record that many of us here know. In the US, it's called PO, Professional Employer Organization. It was a $17 billion industry, was service-driven, use of software. It was very expensive. You can pay up to 20% of the salary of the person. So it wasn't really fit for what I'm trying to do, which is global talent acquisition at scale. But then it connected. My experience with Nexmo was like, okay, we have the same problem here. We have a highly regulated, fragmented market. We can use software to create that employment platform and makes global employment as easy as local employment. So I could see how this could be a very big business very quickly, because we would just open the floodgate for this global talent acquisition use case that wasn't possible before. But I said, why me? Why should I do it myself? It's really when I realized that if you remove the barriers in front of global employment, you can change the world. You can reduce brain drain. People like me, when I had to leave my home country in Lebanon, can stay back in their home country. They can earn more, and they can bring back that income into their communities, and then you break out that cycle of inequality. Just to give you some data points, I mean, I got obsessed with that problem, that kind of macroeconomical problem. Brian Kaplan, who's the economist from George Mason University, in his book Open Borders, he argues that if you remove the concept of borders from talent mobility, you can triple the world GDP. BCG is saying there's 90 million jobs going unfulfilled in the West. That's pre-pandemic. Now it's more. That's $8.5 trillion economic loss. At the same time, you have 1.5 billion knowledge workers coming into the workforce in the next 10 years, the biggest shift in worker demographics since the Industrial Revolution. It was clear to me in January 2020 that we had to build Oyster. And that's what we did. And we started the business in January 2020, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, it's the timing of that is fascinating as it overlays, obviously, with the pandemic and the acceleration, I think, into practices that we once called the future of work. Now we call yesterday, as it relates to many things. But one of the large components of that, obviously, is remote and distributed hybrid work constructs. So what was that? Obviously, I'd imagine January 2020, you did not have a crystal ball around the longer term impacts of COVID and how that would change everything. What was that experience like for you as you're building a company? I mean, usually when you're building a new company, it's a steady kind of scaled growth that could be intentional and thoughtful, and you usually have a plan for your first 3, 6, and 9 months. And I imagine the pandemic and the demand for support resources for remote work blew up those initial plans. So what was that journey like for you? Maybe like the first 6 months of Oyster as you're just building a company, while this huge spike in demand for remote work support resources is happening?
It's a good question, Lars. And I describe it as not only building the plane in the air, but still building the plane, building the runway in 100 kilometer an hour air in front of you. Okay, so it's been an interesting experience. Because what you need to understand with Oyster is that we have to prove to the world that distributed employment is not only better for their business, but it's better for people and better for the planet. Otherwise, we would fail in our mission. So we cannot just hyper grow through burning out our team. We cannot just hyper grow through creating a very poor customer satisfaction. We have to build a strong foundation of the business, and I call it the golden triangle of hyper growth, where you have to deliver the growth, you have to deliver the customer satisfaction, you have to deliver the employee well-being and engagement. And the name of the game is not anymore hyper growth at any cost. Is how you balance these three variables. And we've learned so much through every quarter. We would be off one of these three variables. We've grown too much this quarter. Then the employee satisfaction, the customer satisfaction been impacted. Okay, let's see what we can do. Or we've grown so much in that area where we have some early signs of burnout in that team. Let's just come and overhire here. So make sure that. So we that through iteration, we continue to expand the surface area of that golden triangle of hybrid growth. And I mean, just to give you some data, I mean, we have a 4.5 out of 5 rating on the employee experience of our customers. Like, even if you're hiring in your local market, in your local city, it's really high to get 4.5 out of 5. Imagine that you're hiring cross-border through an intermediary like Oyster. That's that's top quartile. To give you another example, we have employee engagement 90% plus. That's in the top 5% of VC-backed companies. Look at our diversity numbers. We are in 60 countries. We have 60% women in the organization, over 45% on the leadership team. Like, we are intentionally building a company that is designed to prove that distributed work is better for your business, is better for your people, and is better for the planet. And it's so exciting to do both, to build a high growth tech company, but also design what it means to be human centric in 2022.
Yeah. When I think, it's so interesting, so much in the world of work broadly is changing, but much of it is kind of connected to freedom. And a lot of these new models that we have, including remote work, that give more freedom and flexibility to employees. I'm curious. I know I'm asking you a question, and you don't have your data set in front of you, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. But as you look at countries where you're seeing higher spikes of hiring for remote workers, do any maybe surprising countries stand out to you, or you're seeing a lot of your clients invest in higher talent?
Yeah, so the data is not surprising. They are hiring people where knowledge workers are in masses, right? So you look at, North Americans hire in let's say US companies hire in Canada, North American companies hire in Latin America because of the time zone specificity. Some of them go to hire in Europe as well. So you have that North America Europe corridor, and you have Europe to Europe corridor. You have and then you have certain hubs such as Eastern Europe and India that emerges in Australia. So it's not surprising. We have 25% of the employees under management on the platform are in emerging economies. So we are, and it's trending kind of in line with our business, with our growth, which shows you that there's a high level of correlation between our revenue and our mission. But our what we want two things. We want that 25% to become 50% a few years from now, essentially biasing the employment corridor north to south, and secondly, we want the compensation gap. Let's call it, you can call it Gini coefficient, which measures the inequality of income in the world. If you apply it on the Oyster platform, we want that disparity between a salary of the same role, same seniority in the north would be the gap with the same salary of somebody in the south kind of continue to close, right? That's a 10-year journey that we're on.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it's interesting having access, obviously, to the data set that you do. You can kind of see how those trends change over time and kind of where you can directly work to influence narrowing those gaps. And one other topic I want to kind of get your perspective on is hybrid work, which I think if you look at the majority, I would say, of companies that had employees who were able to work remotely during the pandemic. So that's a subset of employees. And obviously, we're just speaking about that pool of talent right now. But, a lot of those organizations have made commitments primarily with hybrid constructs. Some have moved to being fully distributed and remote. The majority, I think, are more in that hybrid. And I think hybrid, at least for the next probably couple of years, is going to be the default model for a lot of those organizations. And there's a lot of variance between what hybrid is. Hybrid isn't just one thing. There's lots of different tiers to it. But I'd love to get your perspective. Obviously, running a fully distributed company, working with companies that are, I'm sure, a mix of fully distributed and hybrid. What are your thoughts on kind of hybrid versus distributed as working models?
Yeah, I think I don't have any like religious view of which is a better model.
Right.
What I believe in is maybe you want me to have a religious view. I don't know,
No, I don't. I want you.
uh,
I'm just curious to get
uh,
your perspective. Yeah.
what I believe in, Lars, is that it doesn't matter as a model. What matters is you need to build a culture and systems and principles that makes people successful no matter where they are. Not because you go to the office that you get more visibility into the work. Not because you go to the office that you get promoted more than if you're not in the office. Not because your office that your productivity increases, right? So so on these things, you have to create inclusiveness and equality in the business, and it's really through changing how you work together, changing the culture, and as importantly, having the commitment from the top. Like in my company, I need to be the best remote worker for it to work. Like I cannot fake it. I cannot. I have to continue to. I know it's going to be hard to change because of my age and my position, but I'm committed. I'm committed to becoming the best remote work CEO in the world. I will never get there, but that's a journey I'm committing to.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's so interesting too, because I think, especially in remote organizations, having that, kind of optimizing the structure and the operating rhythms and cadences of leadership, and kind of role modeling that behavior, I think, as it relates to like, how did you remote effectively? Because so it becomes so important because it gives the employees something they can kind of look to and see the behaviors that they should be, working on as well, which includes, it's the way they work, but it's also the way that they don't work. And that's, a transition. I know that you recently had your third child. So I want to congratulate you on that. But I know that you
Thank
took
you.
time off as a CEO for paternity leave, and getting back to that role modeling place, CEOs don't always do that, especially male CEOs. The paternity leave is something that I think certainly in the US, but also globally, is underused. And so I'd love to just get your perspective on your thoughts on taking that full paternity leave, not just for your family, but for kind of setting that example for the company.
Yes, sure. So, just of history. My first child, I took 2 weeks. My
Yeah.
second child, I took 4. My third child, I took 6. I'm gonna stop there, according to my wife. Uh, what I realized, what the major change I made between my previous company and this company, at Nexmo, I was personally burned out, and I did not notice that much. And actually, what I noticed was that people around me were burning out, and I have a commitment to myself and to the people around me that I want to, as a leader of any organization, my focus is, as much as doing impact, is also reducing my threat to others, right? So how can I reduce the harm I do to others? And it's important that so it is important that I model a way in when it comes to work-life balance. If I am being seen or perceived to be burning out, then they will assume that I expect them to burn out. I expect them not to. So I'm very sensitive to that, especially if you want to build, if you want to prove that remote work is better for business, better for people, and better for the planet. We have to make it work for people. So when I was taking my parental leave, I went back to the team and I asked them, how much do you think I should take? And they guided me toward that number, and I took that number. And it was great. It was really great. What they helped me to put together a system where I could take 6 weeks. I had 2 new joiners in my team, my president and the chief workplace officer, Ellen and Mark, and they were like joining the business. I could not just drop them, so I had 1 hour with each every week. Although I would have we adopt a lot of asynchronous way of working and collaboration. So every Tuesday morning, I would have 1.5 hours where I would just watch all the videos that the team had prepared for me to keep me updated on the business, and I would comment on the videos, and that was it. The business not only survived without me, but they thrived without me. And what was interesting in my previous business, I don't know if you can conclude from anything. Every time I took some time off, which wasn't a lot, the business would do better. And I would measure that, and I was really intrigued. Maybe I am in the way somehow, and that led me to actually also adjust my leadership style in this business to make sure that my ego is not in the way of people's success and business success. And well, thank you for the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as follow up to that, how has remote work made you a better father, a better parent?
First, what is good parenting? So, in my opinion, good parenting is being present to the children and giving them the full attention. And remote work enabled me to be able to do so much more frequently. So, for instance, I have a 3-month-old baby, I have a 2-year-old baby, and I have a 6-year-old child. So in the morning, I spend my time with my younger children, and in the afternoon, I have at 2 p.m. I go pick up my daughter from school, and I spend an hour with her, and then before they go to bed around 7, I also have half an hour booked in my calendar. And when I'm with, and actually the weekend, so also on Friday, we have a Focus Friday principle at Oyster, where we'd have no meetings on Friday. And why? Because it's really the day where I want to clean up my inbox, focus on all the projects that I have to get done before the weekend, so that when I go into the weekend, I'm not worried. I have internal peace, and therefore I can turn my attention to be compassionately present to my children and engage with them. And that's how remote work, flexible work, this is more than remote work. I think whether it's remote work or not, it's really about that. How can you protect your brain from not being anxious about work when you want to be present for your loved one? Okay, how do you create that separation, the mindset separation?
Yeah, I mean that's such a good point, and I think having the space to do that, and I'm glad that you kind of pegged flexibility to remote, because remote and isolation, if you don't have that flexibility, is not that's not creating those spaces and those moments for you to be able to kind of focus on the family time necessarily, especially if it is a traditional organization that kind of looks at work in time blocks, right, of 9 to 5 or whatever kind of legacy structures might exist.
Like Lars, the reason why 50% of my leadership team is women with children is because we enable people, no matter of their situation, through flexible work to be successful, right? That's the commitment we are having. We're saying flexible work is more successful work.
Yeah. Yeah, unless, I think one of the things that's interesting about, kind of building and scaling an organization like yours is you have employees in dozens of countries. You're fully distributed. So you have lots of different, both geographic and cultural differences in your workforce. And so how do you think about, you mentioned kind of the golden triangle in terms of how you grow the business. How do you think about the kind of culture and people first side of the business as you're navigating that complexity of such a globally and culturally diverse workforce?
Yeah, I think business culture trumps country culture. We've seen that again and again in my previous business and in this business. And as long as you can create a strong culture in the business and you can reinforce it, so we're really less concerned about geographical or nationality diversity, because there's no dominant geography or nationality in the business. So everybody is here from 60, 70 countries. But you have to adjust your culture to enable remote work to be successful. So, for instance, take an example. Now, because you're not seeing people in the office, you're not people. We as manager, we had a bug in our brain. We used to assess people's performance with their presence. Also, we have, since we left the factory. In the factory, we used to monitor people on their presence and how many widgets they would create. We moved to the office era, but we still kept that bug, which is, okay, I see you in your seat, then I trust you working. Now we went to work from home and anywhere. You don't have that physical cue. Then the first reaction of manager is to mistrust. And that creates a vicious cycle of underperformance, right? And under engagement. So you have to reverse that. You have to change the chip in your brain, and you say, okay, I want to measure you on output and results, and not presence. But not all companies are ready to do so. You have to build an infrastructure that be able to measure clear results and have a clear expectation in your business. So at Oyster, we spend a lot of time. Our OKR, objective key result process, that start with the company and trickle to the individual level, is the equivalent of a company of 5,000 people, although we are 500 people today. So we've over-invested in these systems and processes. That's in terms of culture, that it needs to be result-driven and not presence-driven. And by the way, this is for. So this is not like specifically for remote work. Any business that adopt a clear framework of defining what success look like and how do we measure result on the company and an individual level will do better. That is better management, period. Now you could get away with it in the office if you didn't have it. Now you have to do it, and you have to do it really well. You have to commit to it. Secondly, so this is one. Number two is really around having clear principles. How do you work together? And that becomes part of the culture. So we use asynchronous way of communication and collaboration. Obviously, every company would have its own flavor of it, its own mix of tools and rules, we call them. And you need to invest in training people, and you need to invest and reinforce them. We have a program called the Oyster Academy that we train people on our own unique way of doing asynchronous work. And by the way, it's open source, and everybody in the world can come and take that class. It's designed for both a remote worker to become a better remote worker, but also to the people function to essentially deploy a remote work program training in their companies. So that's number two, is the rules and the tools. And number three is you want to be very deliberate in creating opportunities to build trust, because trust is harder to build in a virtual environment, because you don't have the person in front of you. You're missing these emotional cues that comes with physical presence. So it's harder, and it takes longer to build trust in a virtual environment, and therefore you want to be deliberate about that. So as part of our values at Oyster is to build trust. When I do check-in meetings with my team. I'm not checking in on their work. I'm checking in on them, how they're doing, because they were able to update me asynchronously ahead of time. So these are just examples of ways of building trust in the business. Every business would have a different approach, but essentially you have to be deliberate in building trust. So number one is culture driven by clear results and clear expectations. Secondly is about having the tools and the rules and reinforce that and train people for that. And third is to be deliberate in building trust.
Yeah, I love the way that you're so intentional about thinking about those three pillars, because I think that they're all so important. And I think as far as companies, especially now, like a lot of companies that were, hybrid and/or remote initially were by necessity, and they just ported their co-located operating systems and their office-based operating systems to digital. Now this is a new way that we are working. And I think companies are getting much more intentional about asynchronous work, moving away from some of those kind of legacy approaches of, measuring productivity by butts and seats and those, things that just aren't relevant to this new world that we're in. So I appreciate the way that you've kind of laid that out thoughtfully. Tony, I've really enjoyed learning about your journey and kind of what you're building with Oyster. We wrap up every episode with a lightning round to just help the audience get to know you a little bit better. So you ready to jump in?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we open with music. If I was looking into your Spotify or whatever music playlist, what would be some of your top three artists that I would learn about?
Yeah, so I checked that actually before this interview. And so the first, so there's Brian Crane. That he's a classical music guy. Brian Crane, that's one. And there are other two that are, I would say, in the same category. So Peter Cutter and Snatam Kaur. They are both very. I call it spiritual music. It helps me to get into. It helps me in staying more present in connecting with something bigger than we think it is. So these are the three top artists in my Spotify.
Okay. I am going to shift your career. So I know you've been a CEO a few times over. You can't be a CEO anymore. You've got to do something else. What do you think you'd be doing?
Yeah, I thought about it since the war broke in Ukraine. I realized that I want to be a peace activist. When I was born in Lebanon, I grew up. There was a civil war. It has impacted all my life, and I realized. So when the war in Ukraine started a few weeks ago, maybe a few days ago, I realized actually I don't want to do my job. I want to go and save the world. And then I realized that actually it's maybe like what can I do, right? Like what can I do to save these people? And it was a pretty sad moment to see that I feel helpless in trying to avoid a world where humans kills humans or kill life is any life is pretty tragic for me.
Yeah, and I just on that note, I want to give your team some kind of props and recognition for the post you put out the day after the invasion, because after the invasion, I was curating some open source resources and communications to try to support the HR community and HR leaders and businesses, frankly, who are navigating this war. And you put out a really, you Oyster put out a really thoughtful post on how to support employees in Ukraine. And so that matters, those resources, those statements, the ability to help the HR community in a meaningful way, support employees who are in an unimaginable situation in Ukraine. That does matter. So I just want to, make sure that that was appreciated, and that does make a difference.
Thank you, Lars.
Last question for you, Tony. Who would be a business leader? Could be an HR leader, but when I usually this is questions around HR leaders, but when I speak to CEOs like you, I kind of scale this to business leaders as well. Who would be a business or HR leader who you admire and why?
So, this guy is called Hamdi. He's the CEO of Shobani, the yogurt. The yogurt. I just stumbled on his TED talk recently, the anti-CEO playbook, and I really liked it because he put people at the center of the business. Also, it wasn't a technology business; it was a yogurt factory, and these principles of like when we go do our MBA at business schools, we are told that we should look at the world through spreadsheets and numbers. And while that's useful sometimes, it actually creates a much more, it's a narrower definition or a view of the reality. And we tend to forget that actually at the end of the day, it's about people. And the way he articulated that has been very inspiring to my journey.
Well, Tony, I really appreciate you making time to come on the podcast, share your story and your journey, and wishing you and the Oyster team all the best.
Thank you, Lars. Great to talk to you all.